Okay. I'm Betty Jean Wilson. I started at Camden-Carroll Library in fall of '74, and I retired in September of 2000. But I actually worked in a number of positions as a librarian. I began with the interlibrary loan position for 2 years, and actually I think my salary came from the Kentucky Department of Libraries, and I actually worked about 25 hours a week. It wasn't a full-time position in interlibrary loan. But even though I was in interlibrary loan and paid by KDL, I still needed to work one night in public service for Camden-Carroll Library. And so I worked one night up in children's literature and in the little archives that they had, which was on the 3rd floor of the original building. Okay. And so, yeah, I started out in interlibrary loan for 2 years. Then in 1976, I was hired full-time, and with the understanding that I would go ahead and work on my master's in library science at UK, which was an American Library Association accredited school. I had a master's at that time, which was from Morehead, and it was a master's in education with emphasis in library science, because they offered some library science courses at Morehead, and that was the degree that the majority of the librarians had at that particular time. But then things were changing nationwide, and from that point on, they were just going to hire librarians that had a library science degree from a ALA institution. So I agreed to do that, and for 3 years I took night classes while I was working full-time to get that degree. Okay. But the first year that I was full-time, I actually worked half a day in cataloging. I mostly did what they called copy cataloging, and then half a day in reference, and then my night was in periodicals. So that first year I was kind of rotating between the 3 departments. And then I got, second year, I was just in reference. And I think that was the year that they had me to work on a bibliography of books to put in the Kentucky Appalachian collection that they were planning to expand. So I would go through the card catalog and look at titles that I think would be appropriate for that particular collection. Now, whether they added them to it or not, I don't know. And then after that, I worked in periodicals for 1 year. And the supervisor and I didn't actually hit it head together. And I think I was working on my master's in library science. I really think she was kind of jealous, thinking that I was going to replace her. I think that's kind of what was the problem. So I wrote a letter and asked for a transfer and got moved to the circulation department. And I worked in circulation for a couple of years. And then after that, I ended up going back to periodicals and served the rest of my career in the periodicals department. I think I was in periodicals for about 18 years, something like that. And at that point, we had about 2,000 active subscriptions. There wasn't any internet or anything like that. They were beginning to get some databases. And so we had the unbound periodicals initially behind the desk. So if people wanted a current issue of something, they had to come to the desk and check it out. And they could just use it in the library. They didn't go outside of the library. And then, of course, we had the bound volumes and then some things on microfilm and microfiche. And the older bound volumes, we actually had to move a lot of them and put on, gosh, I'm confused. I think, first of all, they went to the ground level of the library that used to be the Learning Resource Center. And this was after the new Camden-Carroll wing had been added. And our bound volumes went down there. So we had to move them from first floor to the ground floor, the older bound volumes. And I don't remember exactly what the cutoff date was. But anyway, and then later we ended up moving them from the ground floor to the third floor of that wing. So it was a lot of moving things around. And then at one point, we also moved all of the periodicals that were on microfilm and microfiche from the fourth floor of the tower to periodicals. We did that as a staff. We didn't have any extra help. It was just the staff and the student workers that did all that. So that was kind of difficult. Okay. During that time, I don't know, he wanted me to mention, I got my library science degree from American Library Association School at UK in '79. And I know prior to that, everyone that they hired had to have that particular degree. And I've kind of lost my train of thought. There was a time that we had unbound issues behind the desk. They asked for them. Then we had to move them and put them out in the regular room, and the current issues would be on the shelf with the bound volumes of each particular title. So we did a lot of moving around and that sort of thing. But we did a lot of reference work, and there were times that we actually was the busiest department in the library because we didn't have all of these databases and everything. But then things have changed over the years, and the databases began coming in, well, before I left, you know. And so, but I was on several committees to help choose automated systems for the entire library. And I think the first one we had was LS 2000. I remember we would travel and go visit different libraries and see how their systems worked and ask questions and so forth. And one thing we really wanted was a library system that would also interact well with periodicals. And so we wanted one that would, when you checked in an issue, it would upload to the main library system. And finally, we were able to get that, but initially that wasn't the case. Okay. I chaired some committees in the library, and one in particular that was of interest to the gentleman that's here today was the Librarian Status Committee. And I think we were a member of 4 or 5 librarians trying to decide. We were all initially called assistant librarians, I think was our title. And we didn't have faculty status and didn't look like we were going to get faculty status. So we came up with the plan to name librarians Librarian 1, 2, 3, and 4, which we followed the faculty definitions of instructor, assistant professor, associate professor, and professor, and tried to coordinate the librarians' titles, definitions to that. So now they're Librarian 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we are the ones that were able to institute that system. And you could go for a promotion, and you would do a portfolio, go through a committee and everything to see whether or not you were worthy of moving up to the next level type of thing. And then I also was the one selected to go to faculty senate meetings for a full year and see how the faculty senate operated and everything, because there was a staff congress and a faculty senate, and librarians were not considered to be in either one. We were not represented. And eventually I needed to present to the faculty senate why they should incorporate librarians in the faculty senate as for membership. And so I gave a speech, did a lot of research, and talked to the faculty members, and they did vote to include us in the faculty senate. And then I was the first librarian that was elected from the librarians to be on the faculty senate to represent us. And like all of the other departments, we had 2 representatives. And at one point, Carol Nutter, who was another colleague, actually became the chair of the faculty senate one year. I don't remember specifically. That would have been in the 90s that she did that. So I don't know. You got a question?
Oh yeah. So what was the atmosphere like when you worked at the library?
The atmosphere? It was like our extended family. We were pretty close-knit, and it kind of depended from time to time as to who the director was. You know, I started out with Dr. Ellis as the director. He was fairly easygoing. I'm not sure that he checked on us as much as he might have. And then we had an interim. Faye Belcher had been associate director, and she was the interim director. And I don't know whether I should say this or not, but she was pretty rigid. I do remember when she was there that year that every time we took our 15-minute break or took our lunch break, we had to report to the office when we were leaving and when we returned. That was the only one that ever had us do that sort of thing. And then Larry Besant came in as our permanent director. And I know initially I was kind of disappointed because he didn't have a doctorate, but he had been employed at Chemical Abstracts in Columbus and also Ohio State University. He had been at both of those places for a total of, I think it was 17 years that he was in Columbus. But his knowledge of the operations of the library and what it should do and what it should be was excellent. He was one that you could disagree with, and he would listen to you. Now, whether he would always change his opinion or not, that was another thing. But he did listen to see what you thought and what opinions you had, and would modify his sometimes, But when he came to Camden-Carroll Library, it was with the understanding that the library would automate. And so he's the one that really got us into looking at automated systems and taking us on trips. We really didn't travel much or anything before Larry Besant came, but we did with him. He wanted us to be active in the Kentucky Library Association, as well as the associations that we went with different automated systems. I think we went with a total of 3 complete automated systems during my terminology there. And I know that I also had the opportunity to check into a serials automated check-in system. And so I was sent to Boston a couple times for meetings to learn more about the system and so forth, and also to become acquainted with other serials librarians. And we called ours a periodical librarian, and most larger universities it was a serials librarian, but these would be publications like your popular magazines, professional journals, newspapers, and stuff that came out periodically, type of thing.
What kind of technology was there when you started?
Technology? Well, we had microfilm and microfiche. And of course, the Learning Resource Center had some video equipment and stuff like that they would loan out to students and faculty. But really, there wasn't much technology. I mean, we had electric typewriters, but when I worked at Circulation, at the time I worked at Circulation, which would have been early 80s, I guess, we still used the checkout cards, and people signed the cards and their name and their ID number rather, and so forth. So it wasn't automated at that point.
What was it like getting computers? Like, when did they add computers into the library?
Sometime, I guess, in the late 80s. I can't give you an exact date. I've been retired since September 2000. That's been almost 25 years. And I'm very fortunate to live 25 years after retirement, But things have changed considerably at the library. And I feel that libraries are still needed. I hear people say, oh, with the internet and everything, you don't need the library anymore. You can just get whatever you want from the internet or whatever. But you know, that is not always the best source. They don't always review the information that is provided out there. Whereas in the library, we pretty much reviewed what we were selecting to add to our collection. You know, so it went through peer review. And with internet, that isn't there.
Do you feel like the traditional style of libraries are losing its touch with technology?
Pardon me?
Do you feel like the traditional styles of libraries, like the books and stuff, is losing its touch since digital and the internet?
Did I think it was better?
Like, do you think like how digital, or like how much the internet has changed libraries?
Oh, yes, yes. It's changed considerably, and they don't even have a periodicals department per se anymore. I think they took some at the time and put in the reference department, but not, I don't know how they decided, because that was after my time, and made the periodicals department into a computer lab as such. I don't even know for sure whether it still is a computer lab or not.
It still is.
It is? Okay. So, yeah, things have changed considerably, and I don't think the internet is all bad. I don't mean to insinuate that. I just mean that I don't think that everything you need is found on the internet or is the quality that you might need from the internet that you would have in some other sources. And even with the internet, I think you need some professional help in using the internet, and a lot of people don't have that and don't think they need it either.
What do you miss most about working at the library? What do you miss most about working at the library?
The people, the interaction. I liked public service. I was in cataloging a half a day when I first began, and that was called technical service, and you were behind the scenes, you know, and I didn't enjoy that nearly as much. I liked working with people, and you never knew what aspect of information your question was going to be, and that was very, very interesting. And I remember with interlibrary loan, my husband brought this up the other day. Someone was doing a research paper on the history of toilet paper. And to this day, that's kind of a strange topic to me. And I got that question. At that point, oh, I forgot. We did have a Twix machine in interlibrary loan, teletype. And I'm digressing here. When I first started out in interlibrary loan, we had what they called a Twix machine, but it's a teletype machine. And we would get requests from public libraries throughout the state. And some of them would be just for information. Some were requesting particular books to be sent to them or whatever. And we made copies of articles and mailed books out to different people in different areas. We got some requests from other university libraries and so forth as well. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But the good old Twix. It was a big old clunker, a really big clunker, and you got tapes, and it was really noisy. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about Twix. But that was 1974.
Yeah.
That's been a few years.
What are some memories you had while working at the library?
Pardon me?
What were some memories you had from working in the library? favorite memories? What are some favorite memories you have?
Oh, we used to dress up for Halloween. In my little booklet over there, I've got pictures of me in various Halloween costumes. Some of them really dumb and stupid, but there. But we had retirement parties. We always had a big Christmas party. That was a special time. We would have a potluck at Christmas and invite the retirees that were still living in the area to come to our luncheons for Christmas. And so that was pretty special.
Now, you mentioned earlier, now I'm just curious, but the streaking incident at the library.
Well, I never saw the streaking, but my understanding was they had tennis shoes on. That was the only thing that they were wearing, and that they were males. And I'm not sure whether there were 4, 5, 6, something like that. And they came in the front door, and I know they went down the hallway to the left and through periodicals. And I was trying to remember, I think they may have ran through the second floor reference department too, and then went down the back stairs. But gosh, I didn't get to see a thing.
Maybe it's a good thing.
But then also, and there was a fire at the library in '75. I don't know whether anyone talked about that or not, but I believe a student at the university got in one of the windows of the old snack room that was on first floor. And I'm not sure whether the fire was accidental or on purpose. I don't know, and I don't know what happened to the student. But I do know that we had a lot of smoke damage. And this was like in 1975. I've got an article in my book, my memory book, about that. But I do remember we couldn't let students and staff to come in and use the card catalog, which was on second floor. If they wanted information on a particular topic, we would have to go get a particular drawer and take over to them to look for their topic. And then they would pick out what they want, write it down. We had to go to the stacks to pull whatever books they wanted to use and check out. And they didn't, I guess if I remember correctly, they checked them out at the first floor circulation desk, but we couldn't let them up in the stacks to get books, so we had to go up and down those stacks to get them. And of course, at that time, they had an old-fashioned elevator back there. Do they still have it?
We have a more modern elevator back in for the tower. I'm pretty sure there's another one.
Back in the stacks. Well, there was an old elevator there that broke down quite frequently because it probably had been there since the building was built, you know. So sometimes you could rely on that little elevator, and sometimes you couldn't. You had to run up and down those stacked steps to get whatever anyone wanted.
So, was there any renovations or additions that happened while you were there?
Yes, the wing where Spatial Collections is, Learning Resource Center, that sort of thing, the wing to the east of the library was added in late 70s while I was there.
What was it like having all that happen around you?
I don't know. Helen probably could answer more questions about that because I know Helen Williams ordered a lot of the furniture and everything for the tower over there. She was in the director's office under Dr. Ellis, and she was very much involved in planning the whole tower and the furnishings and so forth for that, much more than I was. So I really wasn't over in that section much.
So is there any other stories you would like to talk about?
Well, we had an exhibitionist in the stacks at one time, a guy, and scared a few of our female students. And they finally discovered who it was, but see, we never knew what the outcome was of their punishment or anything like that. But yeah, we had an exhibitionist in the stacks. And then one time, when I was in periodicals, on the ground floor of the periodicals, we had, I guess it was just a boy and a girl that stayed in the library somehow and were taking kind of erotic pictures down there. And then I remember when the war between Iran and Iraq was going on, I had weekend duty once, and I had to go in and try to break up a fight between Iranians and Iraqians in the vending room.
Wow.
They didn't give me any trouble. I had to be real stern. And I can be when I need to be. But yeah.
Do you miss working there?
Did I like working there?
Do you miss it?
I missed it. I worked a couple years afterwards for like 20 hours a week, weeding books. I didn't like that. I really liked periodicals. I liked the reference work. I liked working with the people and, that sort of thing. So.
Is there any other thing you want to add to it? Anything?
No, the friends, we had some good friends. There were some of us that commuted to library science school together and go down for night classes. Linda Lowe was one, myself, Carol Nutter. Then there were a couple others that haven't been with the university for a number of years, but we'd take turns driving, and we usually just went down one day